Okay, welcome back to the next part of the video. In the last video, we brought the XR2 from Earth out here toward Venus, and we completed our first mid-course correction at a cost of 22.53 meters per second. And if you remember, we stopped at 2 points along the way so that we could get some kind of idea as to what the mid-course correction might cost us otherwise. The first time we stopped was right when stage 1 ended, and the stage is updated, and we found at that point that the mid-course correction would have been 53.15 meters per second. But by warping time forward and waiting until, the closest approach is lower, we found that we could get a much better mid-course correction in terms of cost. So let's bring up this view so we have the larger MFDs to look at. And let's come forward on this side and look at our slingshot view so that we can kind of remember how things were when we left off. And we left it with a PE ratio of exactly 1 and a very low relative inclination. So we are ready to warp time forward to continue the journey along toward Venus. Now, a general rule of thumb that Dimitri told me in terms of mid-course corrections is that every time your distance halves, you kind of want to look into doing another mid-course correction. So before we warp time forward, let's bring up a calculator. And we want to take our destination date when we expect to arrive at Venus, which is 56708. Subtract the date for right now, which is 56661. So we're 47 days out. So in about 25 days, 23 and a half days, we should probably look into doing another mid-course correction because our distance should be about half again as much by then. So that will be when we're at about 56684, we'll look at doing another mid-course correction.
Rotation.
Do a little bit of kill rotate. And we're going to warp time forward here. And there's not much to look at. All the planets are too far away, so we can't exactly rotate toward anything and look at it. So we'll just go forward 10,000. Let's go to 100,000. And let me look at that calculator one more time. I said 56684. You're getting pretty close to that point. And it's close enough. So we're about half again as much along the way to Venus. So let's just kind of look at how things are. Now we could just do translations here without setting up a maneuver, but I'm going to go ahead and set up a maneuver just so we can see what the actual cost is. So we'll turn maneuver mode on, go through the variables, do an update here, and we're not going to worry about the date because we're probably not even going to use the maneuver. We're just wanting to see what it's going to cost and to help get ourselves aligned. Start with a little bit of prograde, and that's helping the relative inclination. So we'll start there, and we'll try some plane change. Okay, so if I put in positive plane change, That's bringing up the PE ratio closer to 1, but it's raising the relative inclination. Okay, I think we can get it with these two variables. That's really close right there. Just a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. So let's go to VW, and we can see that's just going to be 1 meter per second. And I'm not going to bother trying to go through and resetting and seeing if we can get a little bit better with outward or whatever. When you're down to that kind of delta V, I don't think it does any good. So let me go ahead and make a note of that though. 1.094 meters per second is our MCC number 2.
Translation, rotation.
We'll probably spend nearly as much delta V just getting rotated as we will on the actual burn itself. Okay, we're about there. Oops. Overshot that. Okay, now that we're in position, we'll turn maneuver mode off.
Translation.
And we'll just use translation, forward translation to get that actual burn put in. Okay, there we have it. That has us on track. So let's go ahead then and warp time forward to the next point. So that was about 25 days. Just trying to think if we would want to do another one before we get over to Venus or not. Let me bring up Orbit MFD. Let's reference Venus and copy it to the HUD.
Translation, rotation.
And it's somewhere out there in front of us. I can't really see it yet. But we'll warp time forward, and if we see things slipping out very much, then we'll go ahead and do one more mid-course correction here in just maybe like 10 days. Yeah, I think it's worth doing a little bit more because that relative inclination's already slipped by a whole degree. And again, we don't need to do a maneuver, but we will just so we can see, we can kind of keep track of what this is costing us. Maneuver mode on, and same as before. Just kind of see what variables do what. Start there. Let's go ahead and reset plane change. See if outward is better. So it looks like either with outward or plane change, it's still about 1 meter for the relative inclination. Pretty close. Yeah, let's go with that. So yeah, that's very low. That's only 0.8785 for that one. MCC number 3.
Translation. Rotation.
And we'll do the same as before. We'll turn maneuver mode off. And now, now we know we're facing the right direction.
Translation.
So we can just use forward translation. Okay, that takes care of that mid-course correction. And we probably won't need another one because we're so close to Venus at this point. But I think it does help quite a bit to make sure that as you're approaching Venus, your PE ratio and relative inclination are right, pretty much where they need to be. And before we go forward any farther, we should also check our encounter and make sure that we don't need to do any, adjustments. And we kind of needs to do some adjustments here, so let's do that. Because when you do this adjustment, it can have a small impact on what your PE ratio, what your PE ratio and relative inclination are doing. So I like to just drive it straight into the middle. About like that. And you can see, yeah, it didn't really have too much of an impact, but it did a little. So actually I should have set that up first.
Rotation. Translation.
But now that I've got it set up, what I can do is just a small burst of translation. This is control thrust. I'm not even using the main thrust. There we go. That's all the way down to 1. And here we've got 0, 0, 0. Okay, so that's very accurate.
Rotation.
And let's look at Venus again. Get rotated around a prograde. And now we can see it. That's Venus there. Don't know how well it shows up in the playback, but I can see it. Okay, now warp time forward just a little bit farther, and then we'll do a quick save. I think it's always good to have a few extra quick saves. That way, if you want to come back to a specific point in your journey and try different things, you can do that.
Translation. Rotation.
Okay, so again, we're looking at 57008, and we've got about 13 days or so. So let's get within a day or two of Venus. And we'll do a quick save, and we'll do any last refinement here if we want. Okay, we're 4 days out. So let's just do one last little bit of refinement. Let's first start by going all the way forward to stage 4, just to watch our encounter, make sure that it's where it needs to be. Sling direct. And again, we'll just drive straight into the center of Earth. Something like that. Now back to stage 2 here, back to stage 1 on this side. View maneuver, maneuver mode on. And it probably doesn't even matter which variables we use because we're so close. So a little bit of outward is helping both variables, or helping both here. To a point. And we'll just kind of tweak these a little bit. And we'll go with that. That's looking really good. That's another 1 meter. Go ahead and add it to the list. 1.081. So if we add all these together, we've got less than 3 meters a second in additional mid-course corrections. That's going to be number 4.
Translation. Rotation. But I do find that the more accurate your sling is when you get over to that point,
the less of a mid-course correction you have on the other side. Because unfortunately, once we complete the sling and come out the other side, we're going to have our largest mid-course correction for the whole flight. But again, the more accurate this sling is, then the less of a mid-course correction we'll have when we come out the other side. At least that's the way it seems. Okay, maneuver mode off.
Translation.
Now we just translate forward until these look good. And it doesn't get much better than that. P ratio of 1 and a 0.000 relative inclination.
Rotation.
So let's look at Venus. And I'll do the quick save here. And I'll just add this to the scenario folder, basically, that just states, we're 4 days away from Venus. And it's just a good place to pick up if you ever wanted to come back to this scenario and try different things just for the fun of it. But I think we can go forward now and just complete the sling. Although because the relative inclination is going up,
Translation.
I will put in just a little bit of translation to offset it. And I'm doing that without the maneuver because I'm just using control thrust. And that looks really good. That was probably a half a meter, if that.
Rotation.
And let's go forward. Gotta watch it on these planets like Venus, Mars, Mercury. They're pretty small and you don't have a lot of time to do a flyby. So if you're not careful with your time warp, then you'll just blast right on past it. And you can see our stage is updated. Relative inclination's counting down, so we won't worry about it since it's not going up. But one thing we can do if we bring up orbit MFD on this side, we can kind of pay attention to our gravitational influence readout according to, orbit MFD, just to see how close in we get. And of course we can also see the altitude and all of that. We're less than a day away from closest approach. Got a mosquito or something flying around in here. Sling's looking pretty good. PE ratio is 1. Relative inclination getting closer to 0. Of course, it'll probably overshoot it and go out the other way, but even so, it's a good approach.
Translation. Rotation.
Keep the view there in the middle. And we're just 11,000 seconds away from closest approach. A very nice view. Just too bad you can't land on Venus, really. It's just not practical. I've done it before with the Delta glider, since it's invulnerable. But that's our Venus encounter. Sometimes I like to get to these points if I'm doing an encounter like this, and I'll just kind of set the view about like that. Maybe even look at the external camera, and I like to just walk away and let it run at real time for an afternoon or something, you know, while I'm doing other things around the house. I'll just kind of walk back by every now and then and take a look and just kind of see what's going on, see how the approach is, because it's, you know, you don't really spend, you know, that much time. I mean, if you kind of think about it, if you carried this flight out in real time, you know, you spend 100 days, 150 days or whatever getting here, and you can only really see the planet when you're within, you know, a few hours, you know, a half of a day or so. When you're still a whole day or 2 days out, you really can't see it that well. So you've only got about a day where you've got a really good look if you're just doing a flyby. So it's kind of cool to just back off and observe for a while. And I've done that before, where, you know, I'll set these flights up and I'll get to the point where I'm doing the flyby of the planet, and I'll just let it run in real time for the whole afternoon. Not while I'm sitting here at the computer the whole time, obviously. Like I said, I get up and do other things around the house, and I'll just come back every now and then and take a look.
Translation. Rotation.
But we will go forward to closest approach. We're still 2,000 seconds out, so we're going to get a little closer in yet. Gravitational influence is all the way to 0.99. We'll probably get all the way to 1.0. Altitude's down to 12,000 kilometers above the surface.
Translation. Rotation.
That's a pretty good flyby. We're still 200 seconds away. And something else I kind of think of when I'm doing this, if you could imagine being here in real life, you know, imagine you're in the XR2 or whatever, and you're flying by, you could sort of almost think of this number, and you're looking at it and you realize, okay, in 3 minutes time, we're on our way back home. I mean, think about that. You spent 100 days or whatever getting here. You're finally here, you're looking at it, you're getting closer and closer and closer, and you're blown away because, you know, you're seeing this with your own eyes, and it's so amazing. But you've got this, like, countdown, and I would think that it would be, like, all your senses and your mind would be reeling. Like, you know, you just got to absorb it, take it in, get as much appreciation as you possibly can, because as soon as this hits 1 and then 0, you're on your way back home. You know, think about that. It's like you're getting farther away at that point. Kind of show you what I mean. So here we are, we're down to 25 seconds, you know, and in 10 seconds from now, we have gotten as close to Venus as we're ever going to get. And then we're getting farther away from that point forward. So here it is. we're now on our way back home. So that's it. This is as close as we're going to see it.
Translation. Rotation.
So take a good look, because with each passing second, you're getting farther away from Venus. You spent all the time getting here, and now it's already over. Just in the snap of a finger, that's it. It's over. I think that's interesting. But we'll go ahead and leave it at that. This will make for a good stopping point so that when we come back, we have another good look at Venus before we head on out and on our way back to Earth. So if you like this part of the video, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me do a quick save here. And I will see you in the next part.